everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things quizzical 11D billion, because we've hit another email palooza, essentially, because we have some questions to get to. So otherwise, Josh, it's been a couple of weeks. Any updates for anything Kickstarter-related Earthdawn product?
Boy.
Stuff people got to know about? Because I saw somebody leak something from Discord to Facebook, so I had to ask the question.
How best to put this? We were in the process of planning what the next Kickstarter was going to be. And then tariffs.
Yeah.
If anybody of our listeners have been paying any attention to like broader game industry discussion,
Yes.
there are a bunch of companies that are like, we don't know what we're gonna do.
Yes.
We were very lucky in one sense. The deliverables for our outstanding Kickstarter campaigns,
Yeah.
not just Earthdawn.
1879 and Etherstream.
The big one was the Aetherstream, the Leviathan
Yeah.
Kickstarter, because that is like manufactured like plastic minis. Books haven't technically been hit quite as hard, but that stuff was already in transit.
Yes.
So that arrived without the big like 145% nonsense.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that it got out soon enough that we didn't get hammered on that. But it has meant that like our current plans for things that we were potentially going to be doing needed to be
Revamped.
reassessed.
Yes.
So I'm not going to say anything more than that, but that is sort of why campaign
How can
might
you?
be delayed. Yeah. Might be
Everything's in
delayed.
flux.
There's a board game Kickstarter that I was part of that funded a year and change ago. It's for the Horizon Forbidden West board game.
Yes.
That one is like, was about to go into production and was sort of set to be delivered later this year. And we got an email from them saying, okay, well, here's what we're doing. All of the international stuff into one fulfillment category and the U.S. into another. And we're holding off on moving forward with any of the U.S. stuff for another like month until we know what the hell is going on.
Yep.
So it sucks, but we might have to delay delivery on that because, again, it's a board game with a lot of like elaborate plastic detailed injection molded figures, and it's a game that that'll probably end up retailing like would probably normally retail for like $85 or $90.
Yeah.
It's a mess. That's that. On the plus side, I am in rehearsals for a production of a play, ironically enough, called Life Sucks, which is based on Chekhov's Uncle Vanya. It is a fantastic script. I was telling Dan earlier, and I've mentioned this on Facebook if anybody follows me there. It has been, I can't recall the last time that a script and character spoke to me so strongly.
Yes.
I absolutely love some of the scenes in this play. It is funny. It is heartfelt. It is dark. It's sort of in a dark comedy, but not in a nihilistic way. I think overall, like the end of it is like the overall message is life, and
you get one
kinda
shot
do
at
the
it.
best that you can, and yeah, sometimes it sucks, and you just kind of deal with what you've got to deal with and be honest with yourself and with other people. I play Dr. Astor. If you're familiar with Uncle Vanya, that's I can't remember the actual name of the character in Chekhov's play, but it's the doctor who's the close friend of Vanya. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. It's meta. It's one of the reasons that I love theater so much. The playwright Aaron Posner did another sort of adaptation of another Chekhov play called The Seagull. His title of it is That Fucking Bird, or something along those lines. It was nominated for a Tony, and they couldn't, like, on the broadcast say the actual name of the show.
No. Profanity, yes.
Yeah, profanity. So, anyway, we've got emails.
We do.
So we'll get to those. That's part of the reason why we're doing emails, because it's easy production. I just
absolutely
send them to Aunt Dan, and we sit down and ask, and I answer, and we're good.
There's like no show prep. It's just picking off Josh's memory or getting his opinion on things, which is fine. This comes from Dean the Machine. Very quick question. Are there likely to be any 4th edition supplements around Cathay content in the near future? I ask because I recently started a 3rd edition game there, and it would be nice to update with region-specific materials. Thank you, Dean.
There's a short answer on that. Nothing planned for the near future. I've mentioned this on the show multiple times at this point, I think,
Fair.
Because the question does come up every once in a while.
Yeah.
There isn't anybody on the team that has a lot of interest in revisiting that material for various reasons. And so, no, there aren't any plans. There's nothing even slated as a possibility. Doesn't mean there won't necessarily be, but certainly not any time, I would say, in the next couple of years at least, if it ever ends up happening.
So my guess, my 2 cents are just use Cathay as written. It's so far away from what everything else is going on in Barsaive. I don't see a reason to update the timeline there either. So,
well, yeah, and it's not even a timeline updating thing. Like, we're not even gonna I don't think there are any plans to do like a 4th edition version of the unique disciplines or anything like that from the Cathay books from 3rd edition.
yeah.
So whatever you decide to do in terms of mechanically updating it, if that's what you want to do, have fun. It's just not a place that anybody that is currently working with us has any real interest in exploring or revisiting or revising.
Yeah, fair enough. So not going to touch it for a good long time. Use it as is. This one comes from Tibor. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Dear Survival Guide hosts, we are nameless now. First of all, I want to sincerely thank you for your podcast. Since my stroke, I'm no longer able to read, but I can still speak just fine. So I'm continuing to game master for my group. Your podcast has become an invaluable resource for me to stay informed and connected to Earth Dawn, and I truly appreciate the work you put into it. I have a question I'd love to hear your thoughts on. First, Tibor, girl, guy, whatever, best of healing for you and some resilience, because a stroke is nothing to sneeze at. So I'm glad you're still here, and please recover as best as you possibly can. Question. I'm thinking about having my players emerge from their care and encounter a Throalic Army expedition force. I'm toying with the idea that this army might have a group pattern that the players could therefore join. This would give them a power boost, bind them to a good guy faction, and give me, as Game Master, the ability to pass on orders or quests through their military superiors. Do you think it's a bad idea to let major factions have group patterns, or to let players join them? Thanks for everything you do. Warm regards, Tibor.
I echo Dan's sentiment, by the way, with regards to your recovery, Tibor. I have a friend of mine who's one of the founders of the local game con up here in central Maine, who suffered a stroke himself a couple of years back. And it has been quite the road of recovery for him. So I can certainly sympathize with the difficulties and the long hours and the frustration and everything that might go along with that. And certainly appreciate you appreciating us.
Yes.
To answer the question, though, I don't have an issue with, broadly speaking, major factions like that having group patterns. And I don't really have a problem with player characters being able to join them, if that's the case. In some regards, that's kind of what paths are, if you squint, is that they are essentially swearing an oath, kind of joining a special kind of group pattern that gives them access to cool new stuff. I don't know that, broadly speaking, the Throalic Army would have a group pattern like as the army, there certainly could be, for lack of a better term, special forces groups.
Yeah.
Adept groups that are attached to the Throalic Army in some capacity, but
Yeah, a close-knit unit.
Yeah, that act as independent, sort of like independent agents or impossible mission type teams, or something along those lines. That as opposed to the rank and file infantry and cavalry and so forth, would be the ones that would be more independently operating, and that unit might have a group pattern. We talked about, there was at least one of the Carafad tribes that mentioned that they actually do have, like, that the individual squads quite frequently form group patterns among themselves. I don't remember which one it was offhand.
I'll look that one up.
Yeah, conceptually, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have an issue with a little bit of fudging or nudging or hand wavium if you want to give your player characters a little bit of a power boost, access to that kind of magic, and to also tie them more strongly to a particular faction. That is something that I would probably bring up with them as an option, because there are some potential consequences and downsides of group patterns that the characters would probably be aware of. And so you would want to make sure that your players likewise are informed about what's going on there, particularly when it comes to the oath. If you're talking about something more broadly, like the Arm of Thrall, the Throalic Army, it's the oath that is sworn is probably a little bit different than the one that kind of has its examples in the books, where that's a sort of oath of blood peace between the members of the group. And I think the oath would be a little bit broader when it comes to the army, just because of its status. But yeah, broadly speaking, I don't have a problem with it conceptually. I don't have a problem with player characters joining one if that's one that seems appropriate for the campaign and it's something that they want to do. Certainly wouldn't force them into that. Group patterns are wonderful.
Yeah.
I really like them as a concept. It's, again, one of those things that has its conceptual roots in other sources, in other traditions of heroic fantasy and things like that. And the way, just because of the very nature of Earth Dawn's magic system, allows that to have a presence. I mean, you talk about classic legends and mythology and so forth going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. The idea of oath-sworn brothers, I mean, for crying out loud, I think it goes back as far as like Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Like, if you want to talk about how far back that kind of concept goes.
Yeah.
Where the idea of blood brothers or like sworn bosom companions or
sworn allies,
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just something that fits really, really nicely, or at least the shape that Earth Dawn gave it fits really, really nicely with that concept without a lot of stretching or
unbelievability
necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what contracts, compacts, and allegiances are nowadays, politically speaking. They don't do blood between people, but you have this contract between nations and things. And so kind of the same thing. Anyway, couldn't find the orc tribe on my really slapdash notes.
I know it came up. I don't remember who it was either, and that's not really relevant beyond knowing that there is one.
Absolutely not. So no big deal. This comes from Paul. Hi, Josh and Dan. I thought I'd cover off the semi-linked 2 campaigns I run. Both started in Ardanian. Both groups did Ardanian's Revenge, using the Care Dwellers option, but both went in different directions when they left. They were both sent out for the remaining member of the Cross of Ardanian, having both killed one during that adventure's climax. So a quick rundown of the groups. The first campaign I ran had a Troll Skyraider, Tiskrang Swordmaster, Windling Elementalist, Human Nethermancer, and Obsidian Weaponsmith. One of everybody.
Classics all across the board. No notes. Fantastic.
This group was sent to Travar, and among other things, I started to run Terror in the Skies. It went well. They joined the Sky Corps, helped with defending Travar, and made friends with the other members of their Drakar. 3 NPCs in particular, I can't remember their names, as it was just at the start of COVID. Anyway, they went to Caer Talon and started to defend via the lift. This is where it started to go very wrong. One by one, the NPCs who went with them, their friendly 3, got dragged off one by one as the lift descended. Blood bees swooped in and swept them off into the darkness like some horror movie, until it was only the party left. They slowly got more and more exhausted, more and more injured, wounded, etc., but they found the thing that they needed. No spoilers! It was taken, and they gave chase. Now, in the book, this chase is mentioned to take a few days, giving healing time, and in hindsight, I would have made it so, but the Sky Raider rolled over 100. Yes, 100. It was rolled on roll 20, and I still don't believe it, to catch up to the bad guy in their Drakar. There was an epic fight, but due to their injuries, the characters fell one by one until the last managed to pilot a large skyship into the enemy ship, causing a horrific crash, killing everyone. A Pyrrhic victory, total party kill, my second total party kill in over 40 years of gaming. Josh is laughing mercilessly.
In one sense, it's kind of a shame that the game ended up kind of wrapping so quickly because of a total party kill. But at the same time, if you have to have it happen,
blaze of glory
like that.
Oh, yeah. Rest in legend, all you wonderful characters, you.
Roll 20, the dice system in there can be really weird sometimes.
Yeah, I
because it's it's like faux random.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does tend to be even more swingy than rolling actual dice might be.
Yeah. I use the exploding dice bot created for Shadowrun and Earth Dawn on the Discord channel, and that sucker is a little hinky as well.
That can be weird as well.
Exactly. The second campaign had a Windling Nethermancer, Dwarf Beastmaster, Human Thief, Dwarf Elementalist, and a 5th player playing a Troll Thief who died, an Obsidian Warrior who retired, and now an Elf Swordmaster, a survivor of the first campaign total party kill. He was different playgroups, but I'm picking up the thread left off by that campaign. This campaign has run a lot longer, and we're currently on hiatus playing other games, but they played through most of the released Haven material, starting with the Masks, and then moving on to other older scenarios set in Haven, interspersed with the Legends campaign. Now we ended on a high, with the party on the way to curing the fallen passions. I really didn't start with that idea, but it all came from that original Masks scenario I mentioned. It looked like a huge mask that has Dis symbols carved into it. Dis, the passion of slavery. This snowballed into them meeting other mask horrors, Blood Drip being one, and the horror in the Path of Deception being the other, each marked by Ragok or Vestriel. That raises revenants. They followed that thread to a huge complex in the nearby mountains where Harga was based. From this snowballed when they pulled out of the complex unfinished and ignored a load of threads. So after they journeyed back to Ardanian, and a bit of mist to betrayal, and a visit to Caer Eidolon, they found out a few things. Ubir is active on the Serpent River near to the mountains, and a lot of the nearby villages to Haven had been turned into revenants, and a major attack on Haven then occurred. Epic siege loads of horror baggies, black mantises, etc. They succeeded. Then they had gotten all the map pieces and released a major horror, and then decided to finish the complex they found. All of this, they had found the fingerprints of the Cross of Ardanian on it, and the mad wizard Mangalin. They got to the complex fight their way down to the final cave where Ubir rises out of a pit with Mangalin riding him. Epic fight. They win, we cheer, and go into hiatus after a lot of downtime, and them knowing they have to go to Travar. They have found pattern items of passions, know about the places where the passions fell. Amongst them are 3 questers. They're all about 9th Circle right now. I plan the game to weave in Elven Nations, Empty Thrones, and Travar, and finish in the Care of the Rift. Cheers. Paul.
Awesome. Sounds like a fantastic...
fun time.
Campaign.
Yeah. Yes. Again, like Josh said, no notes. This one comes in from Justin, who has Roll20 content questions, so shifting gears. Or returning back to Roll20 real quick. Good evening. My name is Justin. I have been a fan of Earth Dawn since first edition. Still have the books in the attic. I am running a D&D 5th edition group for the last 5 years and are looking to try something different. Earth Dawn being my favorite sword and sorcery, I am preparing this to add to my next campaign. Your podcast has really helped my group to catch the vibe of the setting. I am grateful for the content that is available on Roll20, since my group is scattered across the country. Are there plans to add more, especially the adventures, older editions, or current editions? Also, we need more source books in there too, Elven Nations, Travar, Iopos, and Vasgothia.
That is up to the folks that actually make the Roll20 content.
Yes.
It is licensed through FASA, but we don't actually produce it. There's a sort of volunteer fan who came to us and said, hey, I want to make this stuff. Is that okay? And we basically said, yeah,
sure.
We'll put it up there and we'll get a cut of every copy of the compendia sold.
Yeah.
And so that is completely up to the people who actually make those. I think there has been some talk of maybe making older adventures available, but I think that may have been put on a side burner for now because I think the thought is to update the adventure, at least the stat blocks and stuff, so that they don't have to do a completely separate thing that can all be integrated and compatible with the Roll20 materials that's out there. As for things like Travar or Grand Bazaar, places that are mainly like location books that don't have a lot of mechanics in them.
Yeah, Travar, Iopos.
I don't know how that would necessarily work with Roll20. Not that they couldn't do it, but it would end up just being like a whole bunch of effectively PDF pages kind of attached and having some items or spells or whatever that are in those books able to be dropped into a character sheet.
Yeah.
And again, that's up to the people that make those. I think it's like one guy or just a couple of people that actually work on those.
And
this did get mentioned online. I think I mentioned it in the Discord. I'm pretty sure it got mentioned in the Earth official Facebook group as well.
Yeah.
The upcoming Legends of Earth Dawn Volume 2, so which collects chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12 into a single volume, is actually also going to have included in it Blood Pact and Dead Man's Hand.
Oh, yeah.
From the original Par-Length Adventures, updated to 4th edition and included in that book as a value add. So I suspect that when that is done and comes out, that will be made available. And then the plan is there's going to be one more volume of those, which covers chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. And then we will
adventures in there.
Update the other two adventures in the Par-Length, the original Par-Length Adventures book, and have those in Volume 3. So when you have the 3 volumes of the Haven Legends of Barsaive, you have the full 16-chapter saga, along with the Masks of Fear prologue, and then updated versions of the 4 adventures from Par-Length Adventures. We were looking for some reason to have, for some kind of value add to have for the collected volume, because otherwise it would just basically be the 4 adventures that we had already released in PDF format.
So 20 or 21 in total.
And so we're doing not only those 4 adventures all collected together, but then 2 additional updated adventures that can work rather nicely, I think, as we talked about when we reviewed them, for the Legends of Barsaive campaign, kind of fit them in places. And like made updates, like for example, in Dead Man's Hand, the suggestion is that you have an existing NPC that you use for the hook, the one that gets basically sells himself or loses himself in a bet to Twiceborn.
Yeah.
But if you don't have one, there is an NPC that's in the adventures, like, and you can have it be this person. We changed who that NPC was because if you are familiar with the Legends of Barsaive campaign, there is an NPC in that campaign who is notorious for being an inveterate gambler.
Perfect.
And so we made him be the one that gets taken, so that hook is already in place from the previous encounters and adventures that you have had involving him.
Yeah. That makes a whole lot more sense.
That's the situation going on there.
Cool. I like it.
But other than that, to get back to the point, whether material is updated or made available for Roll20 largely depends on the people who are making that content.
Fair enough. Yes. So I know that that person posts on the Facebook group that updates to Roll20 have been done. So by all means, check out the Facebook group and see if you can find that person or find those posts. Contact them to see if they have any plans to do any more.
Yeah, they're also on the Discord, the FASA Discord. So if you partake in that, you can come on there and ask, and we can see about getting you connected.
Yeah, absolutely. This email comes from a frequent listener, Michael, or frequent emailer, constant listener. Michael, dear Josh and Dan, I rolled a die to determine the order. I have finally caught up to the episode where my first emails got answered. I have, perhaps fortunately, not yet reached any episodes where my later emails got answered. And here I am again with another question that goes down into simulation logic details deep enough to probably annoy Josh. I do apologize, but this is the way my mind works, and who else can I ask if not you? Our party recently acquired some dwarf swords, and I was curious as to what makes a dwarf sword a dwarf sword. While looking over the goods and services table, I noticed that the short sword weighs 50% more than the dwarf sword. 3 pounds for the short sword, 2 pounds for the dwarf sword. Despite the dwarf sword being described as having a broader blade than a short sword, we'll assume some advanced metallurgy is in play, but the dwarf sword has a strength minimum 50% higher than the short sword. 12 for the dwarf, 8 for the short. The description of short sword is vague and inclusive enough, and of dwarf sword narrow enough, that in a Venn diagram, the circle of dwarf swords would be entirely contained within this set of short swords. In first edition, they both weighed at the same 2 pounds, but the dwarf sword still had a higher strength minimum. Any insight as to why a lighter sword has a higher strength minimum in 4th edition? The only thing I can think of is its lower mass means it takes more muscle power to hack the same depth, but that with blade curvature, it's clearly a slashing weapon designed to cut deeper by being drawn along the cut as it makes it. The hacking with it would make your melee weapons teacher facepalm and question his or her life choices, much as Josh no doubt does when he sees my name at the top of an email. That, or it's a typo, or an oversight, and the dwarf sword is the one that's supposed to weigh more. Michael.
So, as Dan was reading that email, I actually grabbed my first edition book off of the shelf to take a look at what it originally was, and then he had the information in the email. The original dwarf sword, going back to first edition, was step 3 damage, whereas the short sword was step 4. The strength minimum is not, in my opinion, purely related to the weight of the weapon.
Fair.
It is also related to the weight distribution of the weapon in terms of where that weight lies within it. It may be, for example, and again, I'm not talking necessarily about the specific weapons in this case or what the thinking might have been behind them or anything. I'm just kind of spitballing here. That a weapon that has the balance point of the weapon is determined by the weight distribution of how the weapon is designed and things like that. It could be, at least conceptually, that the reason that the dwarf sword, despite being the same weight and having a lower base damage, again, talking about first edition here, had the weight distribution be different enough that you actually did need to have a little bit of a higher strength in order to appropriately manage the way that the weapon is balanced. It could be that maybe there's a lot more weight in the blade than compared to a more traditional short sword that has the weight further back in the handle. And so that would affect the way, because if the weight is further out on the end, you're going to be dealing with a lot more leverage-based momentum in terms of needing to control where it goes.
Well, it's meant for a shorter arm.
Right.
So the pivot points are different for the,
That's part of it. It is a weapon that is presumably designed to work with the traditional physiology of a dwarf.
Yes.
They have shorter arms, shorter limbs, but they also have comparatively a higher strength. And so the weapon would have been designed to take advantage of that sort of natural physiology. That's looking at first edition, where, at least to a certain extent, the numbers actually make sense.
Fair.
I don't know when exactly or why, because I haven't bothered to pull up the PDFs of all of the previous editions to check. It would not surprise me if there was a change that was made in 3rd edition that just got carried over into 4th without really looking at the numbers in any particular way. Because we're talking about the player's handbook, which the work that was done on that was not as fundamental for things that I, at the time, didn't think needed any particular attention paid to them.
Fair.
The focus was on, with these new mechanics, how does that interact with talents and spells and stuff? But once the actual attack is made, the
tables,
damage step of the weapon and stuff doesn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah.
So I understand the nature of the question. I also recognize that the numbers in 4th edition, which were probably inherited from 3rd edition, were changed for some reason that I don't know and don't really have any sense of where I might be able to track down why it was done the way it was.
Sure.
And I'm also generally not super particular when I'm running a game about making sure that strength minimums and stuff like that are
met.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
It's a good question. That 5 minutes of rambling is sort of my thoughts on it, and the numbers in 4th edition probably don't make any sense, because I'm sure at some point they were changed for a reason. And it might be that there was a typo that came in. It might have been that somebody was like, I don't understand why this weapon is this way, so we're going to change the stats to do this. And the changes really don't actually make sense if you look at them in the context of everything else. And at that point, I shrug and I go, yeah, it could probably be fixed in some capacity, but I can't be bothered right now.
Yeah, fair enough. I remember on the podcast you were on, the Legends of Barsaive podcast that you were on, somebody made mention that the torch actually did more damage than one of either the sword or the dagger in 1st edition, and so 4th edition had that cleaned up by the time they were playing again. So I remember that specifically going, oh, so no more lit torches doing more damage than a sword or a dagger, something like that.
I don't remember that particular.
No, that's the one line that stuck out to me. Like the first 2 or 3 episodes, whatever. Anyway, had to bring that up. Michael does tell us, however, to keep up the good work, so we will continue to do so, Michael.
Okay, so in 3rd edition,
fair.
The dwarf sword was bumped up to damage step 4 with the strength minimum of 12, but still the weight of 2 pounds. Whereas the short sword was also damage step 4 with the strength minimum of 8 and a weight of 3. So it was something that was changed in 3rd edition, and I don't know why they changed them the way that they did.
Fair.
I don't know why they felt the need to bump the dwarf sword up to damage step 4, because I think it ends up meaning that there isn't a damage step 3 sword any longer.
Okay.
You've got knife at 1, dagger at 2, nothing at 3, then 2 weapons at 4,
Yeah.
broadsword at 5, troll sword at 6,
yeah.
two-handed sword at 7. Like, there was, in 1st edition, a very obvious progression of increasing damage steps for the weapons, and I don't know why they changed it the way that they did in 3rd.
Okay.
Because like I said, it looks like that's where the change came, and we just took the numbers from there and didn't really
alter them,
put them back into whatever context it was.
Fair. All right.
Moving on.
This is the fun email we got from Brian. Brian, thank you for this one. This is going to be fun for me to read.
Don't read the whole thing.
No.
Read the important parts, and then we can kind of TLDR the other pieces.
Absolutely. As I listened to your podcast this morning, I thought about the inventory spell and using ChatGPT. So I ran an experiment to see what my results would be. Below is my prompt, along with all the results from ChatGPT. I think that if I were to use this, I would limit the answer to 10 items or so, because it goes longer than that, dear listener. Also, I would not use the list unaltered, but there is some cool stuff on here. And between Josh and myself, before I get to the rest of the email, there's some things in this list that I don't think are Earth Dawn related, which is kind of the point I want to make about reading some of this stuff off.
If you are a little bit lost about this, when we did the episode a few weeks back about the wizard spells,
yes, third and fourth
from Deeper Secrets, inventory was one of the spells that we talked about, and it was a spell that existed in previous editions and was brought back. And it sort of came up in our discussion that, because of the annoyance, the pain that inventory could potentially provide to a game master, because they would then have to sort of have on hand or at the ready a list of whatever would be in the room that a wizard would be likely to cast inventory in.
Yes.
And the potential downsides of needing to deal with that. As cool as the spell is, the annoyances. And Dan did mention using something like ChatGPT, and I mentioned that I sort of had the question of, the spell does it alphabetically. Mm-hmm. Would ChatGPT actually be able to really correctly put a list of items that you ask it to generate in alphabetical order?
Yeah.
It might actually be close.
Mm-hmm.
LLM generation things like ChatGPT and similar things, they can be useful if you are aware of their limitations.
Yeah.
And I think this email highlights the fact that the limitation is that it's going to provide you with a whole bunch of stuff, and you need to probably vet that list.
Yeah.
Curate it and decide what it is that you are going to keep and what you aren't.
Yeah.
But now, all of that said, let's get back to the email.
Fair. So here's the prompt that he gave to ChatGPT. I am the GM for the fantasy role-playing game Earth Dawn 4th Edition. There is a spell called Inventory that allows a wizard to magically create an alphabetical list of all items in a room. Please generate a list so that I can use this in an alphabetical list of all items that would be found in a wizard's study in Earth Dawn 4th Edition. And ChatGPT gives a paragraph before, blending practical items, arcane tools, and setting appropriate flavor to match the tone and magic of Barsaive. This list does come alphabetical. I'm going to read the first 5-6 things so you can get the alphabetizing, and then I'm going to come across a couple things that really question where it drew from, and Josh can give his opinion because I want Josh's opinion on this stuff. So, alchemical flasks, empty and filled. Ancient scrolls, fragile and untranslated. Astral chart of Barsaive. Bag of fine chalk dust. Beads of astral focus. Okay. Blackened wand fragments. Blood pebble amulet. That one kind of got me. I got about that far and I'm like, what? Bone stylus etched with runes. Book of grimoire maintenance. Okay. Bound journal unmarked. Burnt incense cones. Candles, various colors half melted. Ceramic sigil bowls. Charcoal sketches of horrors. Cloak of minor shielding. Codex of safe spell matrices. Okay. Crystal focus orb glowing faintly. Dagger with etched name, capitalized N, of name. Deck of elemental summoning cards. That one also gets me. The dragon scales in a display case. Dried herbs, mist leaf, sunroot, whisperweed. Never heard of those before. Dust-covered lectern. Elemental binding ring, tarnished. Feather quills, crow quill, phoenix quill, windling quill. That's interesting. Focusing lenses, bronze rimmed. I'm guessing those are glasses. Fossilized insect in amber. Thank you, Jurassic Park. Glass orb containing storm essence. Golden bookmark with warding glyph. Herbalism guide for novice magicians. Illusionist's puppet theater miniature. ink pots. I'm only into the eyes. Any thoughts on these, Josh?
So, this is where one of the limitations of LLM generators like ChatGPT show up. And that is that despite the hype, despite the way it sometimes comes across, this thing, this quote-unquote AI, doesn't actually understand anything.
Agreed.
What it does is it takes the information that you provided in the prompt and in its complex mathematical black box model predicts, this is probably oversimplified and not a complete understanding of it, but essentially is like a super fancy upgraded autofill.
Yeah.
You know, like you get when you're doing your text messages and it gives you like 3 or 4 options of words that like when you start typing it of what they could be and that sort of thing. And so what it's doing is it is choosing based on its statistical predictive model what the most likely words, what word would be most likely to follow the previous one. And it does have within its statistical model that there are certain things, because it has scraped the internet, because its training data has pulled in a bunch of stuff that from Earth Dawn websites, possibly PDF copies of Earth Dawn books.
Likely.
But it doesn't have any real contextual understanding of what anything is. It just knows that, oh, Earth Dawn, Barsaive and Earth Dawn statistically are correlated together as words. Other things like Windling. There are words in there that are very clearly associated with Earth Dawn, but ChatGPT does not understand. It's a statistical model. It does not have any comprehension of what any of this stuff actually is. So you get something weird like Windling Quill, right? We as people who are familiar with the game and the setting go, that's weird because Windlings don't have feathers.
Yes.
But there is, within its statistical model, like it understands that Windlings have wings. Wings are statistically correlated with feathers and quills, and it's kind of like in the same bucket as Phoenix Quill. The Phoenix is not something that shows up in Earth Dawn.
Nope.
I don't think. There are sort of Phoenix-like birds. There's like the Firebird.
Yeah.
Or the
Fire Eagle.
Fire Eagle. There are some birds that are kind of like in that category. But again, because of the statistical correlations of Earth Dawn as a fantasy game, as a D&D-esque game, is also has all of those kind of associated things in that.
Yeah.
That list has a bunch of what in D&D would sort of be considered minor magical items that aren't really a thing in the Earth Dawn paradigm.
Totally.
ChatGPT, again, I cannot stress this enough, does not understand what's going on.
No.
It's just looking at its complex statistical model and saying, oh, these words are associated with each other, and here's a way that I can put them together that comes across as somebody actually talking or providing a list. I am actually impressed, not super surprised, but it actually did do the list alphabetically, assuming like we didn't go and double check that like within any individual letter, the things are actually in proper alphabetical order within like the sub.
They are.
Getting into third and fourth letters and stuff. But anyway.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on. And so if you understand that there is likely to be a bunch of nonsensical garbage, and again, this is where things like ChatGPT and other large language models are dangerous.
Yep.
Because if you, as a person using it, understand the thing that you are asking it about, you can notice things that don't make sense. You can notice things that are wrong.
Yeah.
Problem is that somebody who doesn't know anything or doesn't have sufficient background or context or understanding of what they are asking about are going to ChatGPT and asking it a question, and it is spitting out what its statistical model predicts would be an answer that would make sense, they call it hallucination, where it essentially is just making stuff up. Mm-hmm. Again, just because certain words are associated with each other within its statistical model. And so it goes, oh, these words are kind of alike, and I'm going to put them together in this order because that fits the rules that my model has in terms of how grammar works and stuff. To, like, point out some examples that have happened elsewhere, people using ChatGPT to prepare a legal brief, and it puts a whole bunch of, like, citations in it that don't exist.
Yes.
Because it just recognizes that, oh, this is the format of a citation. It's got, like, a name versus another name and a year. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have, it does not check that against any database. It does not verify anything that it's telling you. It's just spitting out really sophisticated word salad.
Yes.
So if somebody does not understand what they're asking, they are likely to take what it gives them at face value.
As fact.
We look at this list and go, yeah, there's a bunch of, like, really cool stuff in here, and it maybe provides things that, oh, that sparks an idea, but you really need to curate the list, and fix things, and go through. I've seen other things where people are talking to ChatGPT or similar things about Earthdawn and, like, asking it to come up with a character or a magic item or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it very clearly, when you read it, is including, like, a bunch of D&D-isms within it.
Yes.
Because D&D is such a
prevalent,
massive influence on the training data that was in there with regards to RPGs, that it's not going to know that wands in Earthdawn don't have charges, for example. So, Brian, I appreciate you doing this.
I do too.
I appreciate the listeners putting up with my 10-minute rant about LLMs. I mean, again, setting aside the questionable ethics of how they obtained their training data and what they do with it.
Yeah. I mean, just for the example you brought up, is it alphabetical? Yes. Does it make any sense? Not always, because where did I find them? There were the feather quills, crow, phoenix, and windling. Windlings don't have feathers. Phoenixes aren't in the game. Crow, feather, fine, not a problem. But down later in the list, it says quill knife.
Well,
okay.
A quill knife is actually a thing.
Fair.
It's the little knife that you use to sharpen the end of the quill so you can write with it.
Fair. But part of what Josh is saying is that the better term I've heard for AI is not artificial intelligence, because it's not really intelligent. It's more of an aggregate intelligence. It scrapes the internet for all the training data, and so it aggregates all these words together.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, AI as a technical term within computer science has its own particular meanings that is divorced to a certain extent from the popular conception of AI, which is the Star Trek computer or Asimov robots or general intelligences a la human or whatever. The computer in Star Trek is not actually an AI. It is just super advanced.
Yeah.
But machine learning, there are use cases and there are things that machine learning and the AI tools that are created from them in specific contexts are doing amazing things. There are uses for them.
Yes.
But this trend right now to try and shovel this chatbot stuff into everything, that is Silicon Valley folks trying to pull in as much venture capital as they can.
Yeah.
Trying to find some kind of killer app that will allow them to make billions of dollars. And trying to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall to see what sticks. It feels a little bit like the blockchain stuff.
Yes.
Blockchain as a technology is really, really interesting. Its actual use cases are a lot more limited than what they were trying to push of it.
Yeah.
Between stuff like Bitcoin or, various all that other stuff. But machine learning algorithms, the AI stuff generated for that, are doing fantastic things in terms of studying protein folding, of finding potential drugs, doing the early stages of the work, in a sense, because these are dedicated tools built to do a specific thing.
Yeah.
They're able to do a lot of the grunt work to save time, so that then the human experts can take that and go, oh, this is really promising, let's follow up on this, rather than chasing 100 dead ends before they find something useful. I actually heard a news story, if you're familiar with gravitational wave.
Yeah. Gravity waves.
Astronomy, where they have this like interferometer that's basically got two really long lasers at right angles to each other.
Yeah.
When a gravitational wave passes by, it actually changes the length of one of the lasers enough that it changes the interference pattern so that you can actually detect the ripples in space-time caused by two black holes colliding into each other hundreds, if not thousands, of light years away.
Yes.
These are incredibly sensitive instruments. They have used a machine learning tool to try and develop more advanced versions of it that came up with things and designs that seem like really weird at first glance, but actually look like they could probably work and be more sensitive or whatever. Stuff that it would probably take through more traditional methods of research and development decades to like find out, if not more. There is really cool applications of it. ChatGPT and its ilk are largely toys for rich assholes. That's a little bit blunt.
I'm okay with that.
If you are aware going into it what its limitations are, and you are using it perhaps as a starting point or an idea generator, that's fine. But so there you go.
Yeah, fair enough.
My now, probably 20-minute.
Worth it. Worth all of
Emery.
it. He did actually add on a second list just because, he could, and it was pretty quick to do. I would love to see what it would find in a weaponsmith's forge. Please omit anything magical. And it did the exact same thing. A whole list of stuff, very, very long, all alphabetical, including tools and stone basins, sledgehammer, smelting, blah, blah, blah. So all kinds of stuff. So he included that. It was fun. A neat read.
Yeah.
Cull the list.
Yeah, I appreciate... I would not have bothered to do that, to find out. I appreciate Brian doing that and sharing the results with us. The results do not surprise me.
No, not in any way. I knew half of it was going to be wrong or a mix of words from obviously D&D or other fantasy games, because he did say fantasy game. And so a lot of fantasy words popped in there.
But even if in your prompt you don't say fantasy game, like if you just refer to it as Earth Dawn, there is the statistical relationship that will have Earth Dawn be in the same area as fantasy RPG, as D&D, and so there's all of that stuff that's going to be melanged together, and obviously you are going to have an outsized influence from D&D on there, because that training data, that is going to be such a larger piece of the information that it used to set its algorithms, to set its statistical model, that D&D is going to bleed over into any other kind of RPG stuff that you're trying to do with it. You are not going to have it try and have it do a D&D thing and somehow get Earth Dawn influence in there, because the statistical models probably don't have that relationship.
So,
or it could. You never know what the thing's going to do.
Yeah, hopefully they're making improvements on it daily, weekly, monthly, whatever. But yeah, for something as niche as Earth Dawn is, and the terminology that Earth Dawn has compared to most fantasy games, going to be a little different for your results, I assume, for a while anyway. But a fun thought experiment. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, other listeners. Thank you, all the emailers who sent it in to us. We've now covered an hour of nice content for you. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with some more orcs and or spells and some other stuff. So by all means, keep listening. And until then, don't use ChatGPT for your Earth Dawn legend.
Good night, everybody.